What if your memories weren't yours? What if your city wasn't built for people, but for something waiting to return? Tonight, we uncover a terrifying possibility. What if you were designed not to remember, but to carry the memory of something else? The walls are breathing. The reflections no longer follow. And a signal is rewriting humanity from the inside. Welcome to the restoration signal. But be warned, by the time this story ends, you might not be sure who you really are anymore. It began with a name I couldn't remember because it wasn't mine. I was shaving. The mirror was fogged. My mind had been blank. But then, just as I leaned forward to rinse the blade, a sound cut through the silence, like something whispered inside my skull without using words. I didn't hear it. I felt it. Like pressure on bone. The name didn't come from me, it landed in my mind. And once it did, something inside my chest clenched so hard it felt like a heart attack. Elith. I froze. That name meant nothing to me. But the moment it entered my mind, the room changed. The lights dimmed by a fraction. My phone lit up without touching it. The mirror cleared itself, even though I hadn't wiped it. And behind my reflection I saw movement. But I was alone. I turned around. No one. I looked again. The reflection was normal. Almost. But something was off. My pupils were wrong. Wider. Too wide for the morning light. And there was something else, a faint ring of light in my irises, pulsing. I stepped back. My hand trembled. I reached for the door, but the moment I touched the handle, the bathroom floor vibrated. Only for a second. But enough to make my teeth knock together. Then my phone rang. No caller ID. I answered anyway. No voice. Only breathing. And then, my own voice, whispering, "She's waking up inside you." I dropped the phone. From that moment, everything began to unravel. I forgot my email passwords. I couldn't recall what day it was. My fridge was stocked with food I didn't buy. The post-it notes on my kitchen wall had my handwriting, but were signed with initials I didn't recognize, A.R. And worst of all, my dreams weren't mine anymore. They were hers. Each night, I fell asleep and awoke in another body. Not metaphorically. Viscerally. I could feel her hands, their length, the smoothness, the skin not belonging to a man. I could taste the metal tang of air she breathed in a place that wasn't earth. I could feel the way she moved, fast, smooth, like gravity worked differently. She wasn't human. And somehow, her memories were replacing mine. But it didn't stop there. My surroundings began responding to her name. One night, I opened the fridge and the light inside flickered in Morse code. I checked the pattern. It spelled Elith. The moment I read it aloud, all the electronics in the room shut off. Not dead. Silent. As if power itself paused to listen. I ran outside. And in the sky, something glowed. Not a ship. A pattern. 8 points of light, evenly spaced in a circle, hovering above my street in complete silence. No one else seemed to notice. Dogs didn't bark. No car alarms. But I stood there, barefoot, staring at them. And in that moment, I knew, those weren't stars. They were nodes. Beacons. Broadcasting something. A signal. The restoration signal. Designed not to be heard but to trigger. I ran back inside. Locked the doors. But it was too late. My laptop opened itself. On the screen, there was a live feed. A camera inside my house. Not the security cam, an angle that shouldn't exist. Looking at me from above. And beneath the feed was a single line of text. The memories you've lost are being reinstalled. Please remain still. I screamed. I threw the laptop. But the words appeared again, this time on my microwave display. Then on the thermostat. On my TV, even though it was unplugged. I was surrounded by my own devices, and they were no longer mine. I locked myself in the bedroom. And that's when the door knocked itself. 3 times. Slow. Deliberate. I whispered through the door, "Who's there?" And the voice responded not from outside, but from inside my own mouth. I didn't speak it. It spoke through me. I am the first version of you. And I have returned to remember what you forgot. I blacked out. When I woke, it was morning. The lights were normal. The electronics worked. My mirror reflected me, just me. The nodes in the sky were gone. But on my forearm, in faint red lines, as if scratched from the inside out, were the words. Elith. Version 0. Human carrier integrity, 86%. And beneath that, like a whisper etched in flesh. Phase 1 complete. 2 days after the name Elith carved itself beneath my skin, I began hearing other voices. Not in my head. On the radio. In static. In between the stations, I'd catch fragments, people crying, whispering phrases in languages I didn't recognize. Once, I heard my own name. But it wasn't my voice. It was higher. Feminine. Familiar in the way you remember a lullaby you've never heard before. I shut off the radio. It turned itself back on. 3 times in a row. Each time, a different voice. Each one calling a different name. Elith. Velin. Kaurin. I thought I was going insane. But then I checked the news. Nothing major, just scattered reports from around the world. People collapsing mid-conversation. Waking up speaking dead languages. Some were found carving strange symbols into the walls of subway tunnels. Others had gouged the word restore into their skin. The doctors called it a mass psychogenic event. A contagious episode of shared delusion. But I knew better. This was happening because something inside us was waking up. And we were no longer the only ones inside our own bodies. I needed answers. So I drove 6 hours to a man named Dr. Rowan Cordell. An ex-neuroscientist who'd vanished from public life in 2008 after claiming he found non-human residues in the brainstem of trauma victims. His exact words, "There are signals in our DNA that only respond to forgotten languages." I found him living off-grid in Oregon. No phone. No electricity. Just solar panels and walls lined with copper sheets. He opened the door before I knocked. His first words to me, "You've been triggered." I asked how he knew. He pointed to my left eye. Said it had begun to flicker. He brought me inside. Hooked me to an old EEG monitor. Placed 2 fingers on my temples. Whispered something in a tongue I couldn't place. My head exploded with heat. Then he showed me the screen. My brain waves weren't human. Not in structure. They matched a pattern he'd only seen twice before. Once in a girl who vanished after drawing stars in blood across her ceiling. Once in a soldier who burned his fingerprints off claiming they were alien glyphs. Dr. Cordell told me I was becoming something else. That I wasn't just remembering, I was being rewritten. He showed me recordings of patients. Videos that chilled me. One woman had sat in a chair for 9 hours straight, whispering, "I am a body made for memories that aren't mine." Her face kept changing. Subtly. Her cheekbones rising and falling. Her eyes stretching sideways. Not grotesque but wrong. Like her body was struggling to adapt to an identity older than its biology. Another subject had grown light sensitive. Blinded by shadows. He'd etched concentric spirals into his back with his fingernails. In the final frame of the footage, he stared at the camera and said, "You forgot because they made you forget. But the code inside you never stopped remembering." I wanted to leave. But my legs didn't move. Cordell handed me a mirror. My veins were glowing. A soft, amber hue, tracing geometric patterns up my arms like living circuitry. "You're a carrier," he said. "Not just for memory. For something ancient." He told me that what's activating isn't just recall, it's a mnemonic virus. Not biological, not digital. Psychosomatic. Quantum bound. Spread not by contact but by recognition. That's why hearing the name triggered it. The signal rides through meaning. The moment you understand, you become infected. I asked if there was a cure. He laughed. "There's no cure for remembering what you are." I left his cabin shaken. That night, I woke at 3:17 a.m. again. But not in my bed. I was standing in the middle of my kitchen. My hands soaked in red. On the wall, written in a fluid I refused to name, was a message I couldn't erase. Reformation requires disintegration. You must forget your name to remember your function. I didn't remember writing it. But my handwriting did. And for a split second, the reflection in the window wasn't me. It was her. Elith. Smiling. Not with warmth. But with recognition. She was home. For 2 nights in a row, I couldn't sleep. Not because of nightmares. But because the walls were breathing. The plaster expanded and contracted in rhythmic patterns, soft, slow, like something inhaling behind the paint. I pressed my ear against the wall. There was a sound underneath it. Not pipes. Not rats. Something deeper. A pulse like a heartbeat inside stone. At first, I told myself it was just the building settling. But then the street light outside flickered in sync with the walls breathing. And when I looked down, the cracks in my floor had formed a spiral I swear wasn't there the night before. I walked outside to get air. But the sidewalk had changed. Not visibly. Structurally. My feet buzzed. A low vibration traveled through the concrete, barely detectable, but constant. And the strange part? It wasn't random. It was a pattern. I felt it in my bones. A sequence. Like something below was remembering. The next morning, I checked the news. Reports were pouring in from cities around the world. Subways closing due to shifts in infrastructure. Entire blocks sealed off in London after strange subsonic tremors were recorded. In Tokyo, 5 people collapsed in a street market after claiming to see a second skyline rising beneath the actual one. In Los Angeles, sinkholes formed in geometric shapes, each one a perfect octagon. But no mainstream outlet was connecting the dots. Only one underground forum seemed to know. An encrypted site I accessed via a name that whispered itself in my dream, Krihal. The homepage greeted me with a sentence that chilled me. "You built your cities on bones that never died?" Inside were classified scans supposedly leaked from an excavation in Berlin. Subsurface LiDAR imaging. Below the city, at a depth of 800 meters, they found an anatomical structure. Not stone. Not metal. Something organic. Segmented vertebrae the size of subway tunnels, aligned with Berlin's original city grid. They called it the spine. And Berlin wasn't the only one. Similar formations were found beneath Sao Paulo, beneath Paris, beneath Jakarta, beneath New York. Always aligned with city foundations. Always dormant. Until now. The site showed new readings. Electrobiopulses emitting from these formations timed exactly with the same signal Daniel and I had been hearing in our heads. These weren't fossils. These were memory vessels. Old, planetary scale memory cores. Repositories. And when humanity began unlocking Kai, they started to wake up. I looked back at my own city. At the architecture I passed every day. Something clicked. The layout wasn't random. The parks. The roads. The grid. The zoning laws. All of it mirrored something I'd seen before in the dream I had as Elith. A city under black suns. With spires that fed into the sky. With rivers not of water, but of light. My city had been designed using the phantom blueprint of that alien city. Or perhaps the other way around. And just as that thought settled in my chest like ice, the ground shifted beneath my feet. A tremor not violent, but heavy. Focused. Localized. I ran outside. People stopped in the street. Looked down. The pavement trembled. No cars moved. No birds chirped. And then we heard it. A low, ancient moan not from above, but below. Like a whale cry laced in metal. The sound rippled through our bones. Some people dropped to their knees. Others screamed. A child pointed at the sky and said, "It's under us. It's under the city. And it's sad." I grabbed my bag. Ran to the library. Pulled every geological map I could find. I overlaid the fault lines. The fiber optic network. The sewage paths. None of them matched the tremor paths. But one did, the underground parking and utility blueprints. They formed a sigil. A perfect circular glyph, carved over decades of urban development. As if something had guided the architects, the city planners, the construction all to build a neural lattice for something slumbering beneath. We didn't build the cities by chance. We were instructed to. By a memory. A signal. A presence that had embedded itself into the unconscious mind of humanity generations ago, lying dormant, waiting for Kai to begin its restoration cycle. And that cycle was accelerating. On my way home, I passed the Central Plaza. A place I'd walked past 1,000 times. But this time, I looked closely. The cobblestones weren't just decorative. They were symbols. Carved faintly. Eroded by time, but still readable. Alien markings repeating the same word. Return. I knelt down. Touched the center tile. It pulsed. Once. The ground beneath it shifted just slightly. And from below, I heard breathing. Not gas. Not steam. Breathing. Wet. Slow. Ancient. And in that moment, I understood, this city, all our cities, weren't places to live. They were organs. We were the cells. And something had just started to reclaim its body. Something is remembering me. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean literally. I can feel it like the pressure of eyes on the back of your skull when you're alone in a room. But worse. Because the thing remembering me, it doesn't have eyes. It remembers me the way a flame remembers oxygen. The way a lock remembers its key. It started 3 days ago. I walked past a storefront window and saw my reflection blink after I had already turned my head. It didn't glitch. It delayed. A perfect mirror image, just 3 seconds late. At first, I thought it was a trick of the glass. But it kept happening. Not just in windows. In spoons. In my laptop screen. In puddles. In the eyes of people I spoke to. Every reflection had lag. But only mine. And that wasn't all. When I spoke, the room sometimes echoed not in sound, but in temperature. As if the walls responded to my words with sudden shifts in pressure. I'd say it's happening again, and the air would grow dense, the ceiling fan slowing just slightly, responding as if the room had understood and disagreed. And then, the time slips began. Minor, at first. I'd place my phone on the table, look away, then find it back in my hand. I'd walk into a room, turn on the light, and realize it was already on. Then one night, I made tea. Placed the cup on the kitchen counter. Walked to the hallway, returned and saw 2 cups sitting side by side. One half full. One untouched. I didn't own 2. The untouched one was hot. And engraved on its rim faint, but unmistakable was a symbol I had seen before. On the cobblestones. On the inner wall of my dreams. On the iris of Elith. A spiral broken by a single vertical line. It meant breach. That's when I understood. The thing waking up beneath the cities wasn't just activating memory. It was extending itself forward into now. Into us. Not through force. But through recollection. Every time a human remembered a part of it, it remembered us back. And each act of memory, each dream, glitch, déjà vu was a bridge. A neural pathway laid between us and it. And it wasn't waiting anymore. It was returning. Through us. I called Dr. Cordell. Told him what was happening. He didn't speak. Just breathed heavily and said, "Have you seen your shadow detach yet?" I froze. What? He said, "If it's chosen you as a carrier host, your shadow will stop sinking before your voice does. Then your thoughts. Then your shape." I asked how to stop it. He whispered, "You don't. You align. Or you dissolve." Then he hung up. That night, I recorded myself sleeping. The footage showed me tossing, sweating, murmuring in a language no one could recognize. But at 3:33 a.m., something impossible happened. For 10 seconds, I was gone. The bed was empty. The sheets undisturbed. Just a faint imprint on the pillow. Then, without transition, I reappeared. And on the wall behind me words began to write themselves in ash. "She is nearly through." I paused the video. Zoomed in. My eyes were open the whole time. And they were glowing dim, like embers beneath skin. The next day, I went outside. The world felt soft. Not physically, but conceptually. Like the rules that held it together were losing grip. People walked past me without casting shadows. Dogs stared at empty space and growled. Children spoke names that didn't belong to them. One boy told his mother, "Mommy, my other face is sad." A woman at the bus stop began humming the signal perfect tone, perfect pitch, though she insisted she'd never heard it before. The city felt like it was echoing, but with a voice that hadn't been used in millennia. And beneath my feet, I felt the tremor again. This time not from below. From within. My muscles ached in places I didn't know had names. My skin peeled in patterns. Triangular flakes, geometrically precise. And in my dreams, I stopped seeing Elith. I started seeing myself from behind. From her eyes. She was no longer just memory. She was occupying space. Through me. And every moment I thought of her, remembered her shape, her presence, her purpose, I gave her more definition. More clarity. More realness. Then came the knock. 3 soft raps. Same as before. But I didn't open the door. Because this time, it wasn't at the door. It was inside the mirror. I approached slowly. My reflection smiled. But I didn't. Then it whispered, through the glass, without moving lips. It's not memory. It's migration. The spiral lit up across the mirror surface. My reflection cracked. And behind it, I saw her hand, no longer translucent. Not alien. Not human. Mine. She was almost through. And I was almost gone. The world didn't end with a bang. It ended with a whisper. And the whisper came from my own mouth at a time I wasn't speaking. 3 nights ago, I stopped dreaming. Or rather, I stopped being allowed to. Every time I closed my eyes, I woke up standing. Mid-sentence. Somewhere new. Not miles away, no. Inches. Feet. But always just out of place. Facing the wrong mirror. Sitting in a chair I hadn't sat in. Holding objects I didn't own. Time began to stretch in strange ways. I'd check the clock, 3:33 a.m. blink. Still 3:33 a.m. I'd blink again. It would jump to 7:41. I started writing timestamps on my hand to confirm what was real. But the ink bled. Not smeared. Bled into my skin. By the 4th night, I found a word scratched into my forearm in thin, pale lines. Access granted. That's when I stopped fighting. I let it in. And the memories flooded like a broken dam. Not just mine. Not just Elith's. All of them. Across species, time, dimensions. I saw the first of the cities not built, but grown from filament roots spun out of atmosphere and coated stone. I felt the birth of the first mnemonic vaults, the burial of memory inside architecture, the weaving of thought into metal. I watched the core of Earth pulsate as a node, its magnetic field not natural, but anchored by alien design, meant to transmit synchronized resonance when humanity reached enough neural density to unlock it. That was always the plan. Humans weren't the target. We were the wire. And I was the relay. The trigger. I was designed. Engineered through generational steps, backbred through DNA, carried like a dormant key through dreams and decisions until the moment of critical memory density aligned across the collective consciousness. The moment someone remembered enough. The moment I remembered her. The moment Elith's name became more than memory. It became signal. And the signal wasn't just calling something forward, it was rebuilding it through me. Every emotion I had, every choice I made, every time I thought I was resisting, I was fulfilling the protocol. And now the restoration was almost complete. The cities had begun shifting. Entire blocks disappeared overnight. Some resurfaced in different continents. People began to speak the same dream language. Oceans hummed. Birds flew in square patterns. Reflections no longer showed truth, but intention. The earth was becoming synchronized. Aligned. But it wasn't Earth anymore. It was Charon, the original vessel world, rebuilt through us. My body had changed too. Scans showed my brain had grown a third layer, not tissue, but lattice. Like an antenna spun from thought and emotion. My blood carried non-coded ions. My breath no longer condensed. I didn't feel hunger, or fear, or even ownership of the name Daniel. Because I wasn't him anymore. I was what remembered him. What had waited through him. What had finally become. I stood in the central plaza. The air shimmered. No one else was moving. And then they arrived. Not ships. Reflections. Thousands of them, stepping out from mirrored surfaces across the world, not as invaders, but as returners. The forms our species was modeled after. Light-based, neural, fluid in shape but familiar in feeling. They did not speak. They sang. Not with sound, but with memory. And when I stepped forward, they bowed not to me as a god but as a gate. The final opening. The last threshold between what we had forgotten, and what we once were. They reached out not with hands, but with recognition. And in that moment, the sky bent. Gravity softened. The laws of our world rewrote themselves, not erased, just updated. Corrected. Elith stood before me. She was me. Not metaphorically. Literally. I had been the fragment. She, the source. The memory stored in me had finally saturated to form. Her mind spoke inside mine. You did not awaken us. You became us. The signal faded. Because it had fulfilled its purpose. And in its place was silence. Not empty. Full. Alive. The earth took its first breath as a memory restored. And I closed my eyes, not as Daniel, not as host, not even as human. But as the vessel that remembers the stars. So what was Daniel? A man infected by a signal? Or the final vessel through which an ancient intelligence remembered itself? And what about us? Are we carriers of our own minds or echoes waiting to be reactivated? If you were in Daniel's place, would you resist the signal or let it through? Let us know in the comments. Backhand index pointing right. What was the most chilling part of this story for you? Backhand index pointing right. If your body began remembering something not human, would you tell someone, or stay silent? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Alien Storyverse, where each episode unlocks another truth they never wanted you to hear. And remember, you're not just hearing a story, you're remembering one.